Loveland Magazine TV videos are brought to you by the generous support of MoveToLoveland.com.
Good evening, my name is Doug Hinger. I'm with Tradition Building and Development Group, 4000 Executive Park Drive in Cincinnati. We were approached by the Schildmeyer family to help them put together a high-quality development that would maintain their love of the river and make sure that the floodway and the riverway was preserved. And we've tried to do that as best we can in the short time that we've looked at this property. The question in front of you tonight is whether an SPD is appropriate to review this project. We have not presented the project to any great degree. We are here and have made this application at the suggestion of staff, as it does give the planning and zoning and the city council the ability to use more regulation and to create and craft a plan to develop this property in a way that is a win-win for everybody. So I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay. All right. That would end the public hearing, so we need a motion to close it.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Mr. Berger?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Weisgerber?
Yes.
4-0, motion carries.
Okay. Next order of business is open forum, but nobody signed up for that, so we're not going to. We'll move on to the old business, which is case 2403 we've been talking about, special planning district traditions. So this is the part where we discuss. So I would ask everybody, please, while we talk through this, don't want to hear any catcalling or comments or whatever. Please be respectful as we talk through this, so we can do our part of the business. This part is for you guys to see us in the process. The public hearing is for you guys to give us a comment. So that's kind of how this works, just for you that may not have been here before. So, all right, thank you for that. Anybody want to start off with any discussion? Mr. Weisgerber?
Yeah, you know where I'm at.
Yeah.
So, and I think I made myself pretty clear the last time we had our session, and I made that comment again. I think there are some other choices here. And while I appreciate the great work that Traditions has done, and I know the Schildmeyer family very well, and I totally get what let me put it this way: this board and commission really wears two hats. One, help you as a resident maximize your property value. At the same time, we're here to protect the community and protect the residents of the community. That's what this is about, right? This is why you're here. It's that balance, which is really tough to do. I was part of council for a lot of years, along with Mr. Osborne. The addition of scenic waterway protections happened while I was on council. I don't remember if it happened when I was mayor or not, but the comments made, I totally resonate with, and thank you for being here. My position has been that the SPD is tailorable, and I get whilst my staff would make that recommendation. It is tailorable. It is a mechanism where we can build in protections to the property, as well as work with the developer to make sure that the density is appropriate, to make sure the other protections for the neighborhood are appropriate and built into this. That being said, I think there's some other choices that we can work on, because I don't believe that overstepping on the scenic waterway protections is appropriate, because it is now going to set a precedent, in my opinion, to make all the property along the river fair game at some point in the future. And I'm very concerned about that. It doesn't mean that there won't be protections in the SPD, but overriding the zoning, which can be done, I still think is a mistake for this board to pursue. I think, like I said, we need to go on and look at other options and help both the developer and help the property owner while trying to strike a better balance of protection. I don't believe the SPD is needed. I think the statement that I made earlier about the requirement, because the scenic waterway is there, we don't need to have the SPD. It's a tool to continue protection, but I don't think it's the right way to go. So clearly, I'm not going to want to move forward with the SPD. I think postponing it, and this is what I said in our last meeting, postponing it drags it out even further for the property owner and the developer, and I would hate to do that myself. I don't think that's appropriate. So clearly my support here is to not move forward with the SPD. I really value, and everyone here, your opinions are valued, and I really appreciate them. There's one opinion in this room, and there's a couple that stand probably, for me personally, a level up. Jason, thank you for being here. I value your opinion with regards to the river across this state, the work that you do. And in the past, we haven't always had the best relationship with this Little Miami Conservancy in Loveland, but that's gotten tremendously better, especially at your hand. For you to not have a viable path forward with what's presented, to me, means there's a lot of work that has to be done if this was to ever move forward, to find a way to tailor this to make it right. Again, I'm not in favor of this. I think I've made that clear before, and I'm not going to vote to support it.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts?
Sure.
Comments?
Yeah, I'll echo the sentiments of Mr. Weisgerber in the sense that really appreciate everybody's comments this evening. I also think Mr. Weinisch laying out the timeline of how we got here, I think has proven to be useful to understand the process by which planning and zoning changes and applications for potential development, the way that works. So I was a big government nerd in high school, so I always appreciate the opportunity when we have the chance to see it in practice. But I think that really planning and zoning, this commission is essentially a first pass filter on development outside the normal scheme that's existing in our zoning ordinances. And yes, staff are the folks that see this the first time, right? They're the ones that can provide guidance and recommendations as to a way forward. But they're really not supposed to, it's an objective filter there at that point, right? It's somewhat transactional. Here we can weigh in a little bit more on the nuances, and I can say a lot, but I can't say as much in the volume that was said here tonight. And so I think that us moving this along through the process has helped to establish. I mentioned last month, we benefited from a cancellation, so that this hit the watchdog groups and whatnot, put this out there so that people could weigh in. This came out to a December 3rd meeting eventually, a month later than originally planned, and we got to hear initially some of our own thoughts on this. And again, I think that this project is sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And we look at the purpose and scope, and again, I was kind of weighing back and forth on this idea of the promoting creative and sensitive site planning, preserving the unique characteristics of the land, or to provide for the greater range or mixture of land uses when appropriate. So you've got this sort of, the development, the proposal is really attempting to split those two hairs, I think, and it's a very fine line. But by bringing everybody here through the public hearing and the notifications that went out, we actually got to hear from a lot of groups, and advocacy groups, people that have live their lives and careers on the river, people that live in the neighborhood. So again, I thank everybody for being here. I thank Mr. Weinisch for helping to set the table for this, and staff, of course, for their role. But now it's our turn. I found this to be immensely valuable as I've looked at this process, but I knew coming in that having as many voices provide input would be a big sense of, for the barometer for me personally. I hope it was valuable also for the applicant. I think that hearing from the community their concerns on this project without any filters, hearing right straight from everybody's mouths and hearts and minds, that must have been valuable. And again, as I mentioned before, I hope all of you found this valuable as well. Again, for me, you know, the issue here is that fine line of understanding how can we protect the rights of the property owner, and that's what the purpose of planning and zoning is. And one of our speakers, I think it was Mrs. Scoventer, mentioned the wise words of Mr. Weisgerber. And when I first joined on this P&Z, he told me that was the purpose. You know, when you think about what do we do at P&Z, it's to protect property owners' rights. Basically, that's it. You know, and that could be the applicant who's the property owner. It could be the neighbors, the adjacent property. It can even be, when you look at this particular parcel or set of parcels, you know, and Mr. Bersani mentioned this, that could be to some extent those walking along the bike trail across from this property. You know, they have rights. The Scenic River, you know, we have to be stewards of this. So the scenic waterway access, the scenic waterway zone, and the special planning district, I'm having a difficult time seeing this mesh. I definitely recognize the need to have some creative site planning and zoning. The current zoning does provide some challenges that would require creative development plans, but there's also this protective status on the river. And so for me, also looking at the maps, you know, we've got basically 3 miles of riverfront frontage in the city of Loveland. It's a 5 or 6 mile or square mile city. So it really does cut through the heart of who we are, and it provides so much, whether it's the recreation, the wildlife, the water itself, quality of life. And so I'm also looking at some of the, you know, maybe I have a little bit of an attention span issue, because I always peek ahead in the packet. And so looking at where this would go, and Mr. Weinich mentioned this around the findings of fact, and looking at where we need to, as a council member sitting here, I need to look at and understand what would happen if this were to go forward, if this were to move to the next step. And there's a lot of references to the comprehensive master plan and the future land use map that exists on that. And one of the things that struck me was that along that 3 or so miles of river frontage, you only have 4 zones in that future land use map. So not to be, there's probably some differences with the actual zoning, but in terms of the comprehensive plan, it's only flagged for 4. Office and light industrial, which you can imagine is all along Riverside, which is basically to the heading down, you turn left on Riverside. Having a little spatial disorientation here on my compass, and across is parks and recreation and open space. There's also mixed use downtown, which is basically to the south, across on the other on the historic district. And then there's the historic residential. This parcel is the only one among the historic residential. It's basically a unicorn among those 4 zones that exist along the river. And so that definitely brings some challenges to determine what should go there or how that could be developed. And so again, going back to the comprehensive plan itself and looking at a little bit more along what they refer to historic residential, it goes on to say things about maintaining the current density and having it fit into place with what exists in the neighborhood. And so again, we've got members of the neighborhood here talking about you know, the institutional historical society, the business, the old historic homes that are unique. I'm not opposed to modern development style. I don't think this is really why we're here, is to sort of talk about whether or not we like how new builds look. But certainly I think we can talk about how many new builds there should be. And so I definitely am leaning towards, you know, this doesn't really fit with what's going on there. There's 12 proposed, and it's kind of like to max it out as much as possible is what it feels like, and reminiscent of another development proposal that we saw here a couple of years ago. You know, the land is there, it's got these zoning challenges. Let's put it under a special planning district to confront those challenges, but that doesn't necessarily mean max out what that could be. And I think that's where this volume of this chorus of voices really comes from, is that density increase, and then you layer on top of that, again, going back to what I was talking about, the heart of the heart of Loveland, the Little Miami River. When we layer on all the environmental concerns, and people mentioned, I love that. This is a brief aside, but I love all the talk about all the different critters and animals that were here: salamanders, bald eagles. That was crawdads. But the idea of setting a precedent of riverside development, that strikes a chord with me, and I don't want to do that. I don't think that's something that we want to do here as a. I don't want to speak for my colleagues on council, but judging from some of the conversations that I have had, I feel like that the Little Miami River is a sacred place for our community, and the residents have spoken around that tonight. But we don't want to allow it to be easier to develop that land. We certainly don't want to make it more difficult for people like the Schildmeyers, who are looking to try to do something with that, something that's creative, something that's in keeping with the neighborhood, that's in keeping with their business, and they certainly have personal attachments to this land. I think they know when something's going to be a hit or a miss on this regard. So as I mentioned, if we're a first pass filter on this, and I'm certainly leaning towards putting this back in the hands of the developer, I hope that this ends up being kind of a first draft for them, and that they're able to do something that is, as I mentioned, in better keeping with the neighborhood, better keeping with the spirit, and in better protection of the Little Miami River. So that's really all my thoughts on that at this point. I can go on. Yeah, there was more.
Yeah, I guess I look at this from a little bit different perspective from my professional career and what I've done and what I currently do. I understand what the Schildmeyers are trying to do, wanting to do, and I in my professional career have come across Doug and MSP and other developments that have been successful. But I will say to everybody that there is a balance. Is this the right plan? I don't know that it is. I think this is a good step to kind of go along with Andy. This is a good step. Is it the right step? I don't know. And commend staff for looking at zonings. I've been in on all three sides of this situation. I've been sitting in your seat. I'm sitting here. I've been involved in their seat, in their seat. So all four sides of this I've been involved with. There's always things that you're never going to make everybody happy about what you do. But I do think that from the standpoint of looking out for the property owner's rights, the property owner on this is the Schildmeyers. So we all can have what we envision and what we want the Loveland to be, but it's ultimately their property, and we have zoning to make sure that basic rules are followed. The uniqueness of this property is there are three somewhat conflicting properties on essentially one parcel. It is technically 2 parcels, but it's three zones and it's 1 owner. And they have utilized that property somewhat as one property over the years from what I can look back through historical aerials and see. So we have to look out for what they want to do as well. And from a professional standpoint, understanding the flood zone and what that does, there are work that they will have to do. They'll have to follow regulations before anybody here, or before the Hamilton County or the Claremont County or the state of Ohio would approve that. There would be things that the Corps of Engineers, because you are impacting, they would have to take a look at this, and we would have to see what the impact was. Having done work in floodway or floodplains before, not the floodway, because you don't do anything in the floodway. You have to make sure that it does not impact other properties. So I'm a little bit of, this is maybe not the initial right plan, but they could go put 4 houses on the one group and 1 large house on the other group, and those houses could, those residents or structures could be the equivalent, or if not greater, than what they're proposing here. And there'd be not a lot that could be done about it as long as they're following the current zoning. And there's ways to do that not to impact the floodway, and how to mitigate impact to the floodplain, and mitigate how you impact the floodplain and build around that. So I think this is a first step. I would be of the opinion and the thought that the special planning district is still an opportunity to have more input. Again, they could go back, and Doug could come up with 4 houses on the one parcel and a large house on the other parcel, and we wouldn't be here. I mean, it would be following the normal zoning. So to me, the special planning districts, how do you address the 3 I don't say conflicting, but the 3 unique uses of this one parcel? And I've had to do that before, consolidate. It's not fun, and it's not. There's sometimes it just doesn't work. But I would be in support of doing the special planning district just for that matter. And then I hear everybody wants to. We still control what can be done to that, and what zoning is enforced and how it is enforced on there. So that's where I'm at on this. And again, ultimately it's the Schildmeyer's property, and I will say stuff was built here, had been built here for many years. And when does somebody start saying, no, I've got mine, you can't have yours? We run across that in the development world all the time. And it's something that we have to deal with. So I know that's not, I'm listening, I know that's not popular, but it is true. So, but again, I'm not saying this is the right thing to do. I think there's still some more work that needs to be done. So, and I think the special planning district or another avenue to do that is the right way to do it. So.
Any follow-up comments or thoughts?
I mean, I don't disagree that the special planning district may still hold the key for the future of this property, but again, I think that it's almost to the point of, to use another baseball analogy, next at bat, like not necessarily through this public process, but take it back, learn from what we've heard, and see what comes back, next time around the batting order.
And one more thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. If you wanted to finish up.
Yeah, I did want to add one thing. Is the studies that they're going to have to do and the design work that is going to have to go into this is really expensive. So for them, they have to understand before they go spend 6 figures that this could be a viable project. And to do that, they have to have some assurances that it can go forward. They're not going to go make an enormous capital investment of that nature without understanding that this could go forward if they do certain things. And I think understanding that a special planning district is a way to do that and to gather more information, and I'm sure they're sitting here, they're hearing what everybody's saying, is to get some way to be able to say that this could be a viable project before we go and expend that much capital funding. So with that, that's...
So my only other follow-on was, in the past, I think in the past I've said I think there's some other options to look at. I think basically what I'm hearing is, that we got to protect the river, we got to protect the floodway. And what's up and downstream as a result of changing where the river can flood into, water quality, right? Those are the things that get most everybody here pretty riled up, and rightfully so. That's where I'm at. And what's been said is correct in terms of what can be done under the current zoning. So the SPD is here as a tool. That's why it's in our code, to allow some flexibility. What I'd like to have happen is to make sure that the river is protected. Make sure we're protecting that scenic waterway. That doesn't rule out doing a zone change where you're combining some of these property lines or moving the zone lines. It doesn't change, because that's what an SPD does. It creates a new zone within that boundary of that property. The other is to leave the scenic waterway alone and create an SPD along the upper portion of the property to tailor the development that allows the Schildmeyers and the community to participate in that development. It's not going to be a city park, right? I mean, it's privately owned, and they're making a request to develop their property. And like I've tried to say before, we're here as a board looking out for the property owner's rights and your rights. And that's what we're trying to balance. My put is, let's find a way to keep the scenic waterway more sacred and move forward with another approach. And that's why I would say, let's stop this process and start fresh where we have it more tailored.
Okay. All right, I'll put my 2 cents worth in. I'm not going to reiterate everything everybody said. I grew up in Loveland, so everybody knows. I went to high school here, and so I appreciate Loveland for what it was. And we're going through growth pains. We've been going through growth pains for a long, long time. So part of the pain of growth is how to decide what Loveland needs to be tomorrow. And one of the things we run into is if we've been here for a while, we don't want to see a change, because we liked it when we moved here. But a lot of what we moved into was not here previously, so we benefited from some of that. House I live in was built in 1990, and it was probably farmland back then. And maybe I probably live in an SPD myself without even knowing it. But I'm also sensitive to, and one of the reasons I wanted to move this forward to this meeting is because I want to hear everybody's input. I think it's important to have these. I think the developer, it's important for them to hear this, to hear the comments from everybody. And I agree, it's something it's a privately owned property. It's not a park. It's not something that we all own. It's something that the property owner wants to try to do something with. Now, unfortunately, it's got 3 different zoning districts in it, which makes it difficult for them to do something with their property. So trying to find and again, I'm sort of on the same page. Is this the best plan? Again, we don't have a whole lot of information to work with, and it's a concept right now. We don't know. Obviously, I would love to have the Little Miami preserved myself. I don't want to do anything to be detrimental to that at all. I before I moved here when I was 12. I grew up in northern Ohio, and there was a Cuyahoga River was there, and they were working on cleaning up the Cuyahoga River at the time. So I'm very sensitive to that. At the same token, we've got to figure out how can we allow some development to occur in a smart and intelligent way and still be able to preserve the nature around it, and to make this something that looks beautiful along with the surrounding community and get input. And again, as we pointed out, that there's a lot of studies that are going to get done because you don't want to impact your neighbors' floodways and everything else. Right now, we just have a drawing, and the developer doesn't obviously want to put tons of money into going a bunch of studies until they know that there's a concept that might work or might not work, and get everybody's input into it. So again, I don't know the right vehicle, if this is the right method. If we push it, kick the can down the road, and we would need more studies, and we'd have to get some more information. But the other option we have is to say, all right, go back to the drawing board and look at it again and come back with, you know, maybe get some more thought in how this can occur. And because obviously the Silmar want to do something with their property. This is the right approach, and we've done this before in other special planning districts where we said, okay, the density's too much, get less houses, get less units, do this, do that. There's been things we've done to work with it. Right now, we don't have much to go by in terms of other than here's a site plan to work with. So that makes it more difficult when we get complicated zoning issues we got to deal with, because none of us, I don't think, want to overwrite and make it less protected to Miami by anything we do. We're not at all want to do that, but I don't know right now, again, the best vehicle to put protections in, and special planning districts can actually make it more restrictive, and we could require them to restore it to the original habitat it was 50 years ago if we wanted to. I mean, there's different things we could do to require that. So I don't want anybody to panic if we move this forward, but at the same token, something's probably going to happen to this property one way or the other. So we want to be able to make sure we do what is good, and we're not going to make everybody happy. I wish we could, but we've got to have something that's a good compromise for everybody that everybody can live with. Because development's going to occur, things are going to happen, things are going to change. It's been going on for our lifetime, and it will keep going on. So I think we want to try to figure out the best way to make that happen, so we can all have something that's beneficial. Because I want Loveland to become something that's better than it is today, and so when our kids and grandkids want to move back here and live here. So that's kind of what my feeling on it. So any other thoughts?
Just ask you to clarify one thing.
I'm sorry. If you get permission from the chairman.
No, never mind.
Go to the podium, give your.
Yeah, okay. I just had a quick thought.
But this is their time.
Yes. I'm sorry. We're good.
Okay.
All right, so I guess from staff, let's see what some of the options are, just so we understand. And what would happen, so if we were to move it forward, what's the process for moving it forward? If we table, or have more questions, what's the different options part of the process?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have three options. Obviously, first is to recommend the initiation of the SPD, which means it moves forward to council with a recommendation of approval from the commission. So, in any of these circumstances, except for voting to continue the review, so if you have open, you could potentially have open dialogue with the applicant here and talk about other ideas that you would like to see, and they could agree to come back at a later date to show you other options. Or your other option, obviously your other option is to vote not to recommend. In all of these, in any option that whether you vote to recommend or vote to deny, it will go to it will go to council either way, because your recommendation will go to them and they will decide. Now, if you have a recommendation of no, Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it'll be a super majority. by council to overturn anything that this commission has decided. So either way you go, the city council will have an opportunity to review this initiation of the SPD.
Yeah, but I think just for clarity, because I'm gonna make a motion that's gonna say, don't proceed, it then opens the door for the property owner and developer to take a step back and relook and come back with another plan.
That's correct.
It's one way to start, based on all this input, a separate relook versus, and you could do it the other way, which is vote to continue it, which then says, based on all of this, what are we going to do next? It depends on what message you want to send.
Correct.
Yes,
And so,
Just for the sake of clarification, per Robert's rules, with Mr. O'Neill not being here, what if it's 2 and 2?
He fails.
It fails.
Gotcha.
And then we'd have to decide if there's an additional recommendation at that point.
Very good, thank you.
I guess I have a question more for Chris and either Dave. If we continue, it's essentially just continuing, they can come back, we can agree upon a certain amount of time, come back with a different plan. If we vote it down, they can't come back with this plan, or do we preclude them if we vote no? Do we preclude them from coming back with us another SPD for this?
as long as the concept plan has changed in some form or fashion with the major elements, which are basically in this situation, major elements are density, and that's really the density and the setbacks are what they're asking for the most part, what they need different. So if they come back with a different concept plan, that would be considered a new request for an SPD.
Okay.
So if you deny today and council agree, council will look at it and whatever they decide, they can come back with a new plan, but they cannot come back with the identical plan.
Go ahead.
Would it be appropriate to see if there's any input from the property owner or the developer on this?
Yeah, you can certainly have open dialogue with the.
I mean, do they
Yeah,
have a preference of?
If you ask them, we gotta bring them up to the.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Do we?
Yes.
I'm not sure which way to go right now. I think it's up to the planning and zoning to make that call. We certainly are willing to discuss the project. We have not presented it in any detail. We have not had discussions with very many people. I believe this hearing was about trying to understand the rules of engagement, so to speak, as we go forward. So until we know what those rules are, it's very difficult to do the hypotheticals about kind of what's the way forward. So if you believe that the SPD, which by the way can incorporate those protections that are already in place, it certainly gives us the most flexibility, and it gives us the, extending this gives us 30 days to see whether there's enough common ground that maybe there is a compromise going forward here. The site itself is fairly constricted on what is able to be done and what is the responsible way to develop it. So, we've tried our best. We've been in business for 40 years. Check out any of our work. Encourage you to do that. I think we've always done very high quality work wherever we've done, and the communities in which we've done our work have always benefited by that. We'd like to do that in Loveland. We've been invited into your community to try to provide that to Loveland, and to the site. I too am a kayaker and a biker. I was on the trail this last week before the snow hit. So I do understand that. I have gone over, taken pictures from Elizabeth Park. I do understand the vegetation and how that works. I think having a period of dialogue would be helpful, because as I said, we have not really presented any of this to anybody. We've heard comments that it's not what somebody wanted when they haven't really seen what the project is. So we would encourage dialogue and maybe an opportunity to explain further.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to move this forward, is because I think it's very important to get, if everybody can hear me, to get that input from everyone. Yes, but.
McGill's.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Applicants,
I need to put my glasses on.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman, Planning and Zoning Commission, Richard Arnold, McGill, Smith, Ponson. Just to Mr. Parker's point, that if the SPD would go forward, you get another bite to the apple in that we've got to submit a preliminary development plan. And along with that preliminary development plan would be more detail as to stormwater quality, detention, and so forth. So you can take that into consideration when you think about this tonight. Thank you.
Also, just for reference, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's two scenic waterway districts. There's an active district and a passive district. The passive district does allow permitted accessory use structures to be built if they're adjacent to residential medium density districts. So, and there are different types of buildings, different size buildings. They could be 15 feet tall, certain square footage, all kinds of different things that can happen. So it's not as if that land and nothing can be built there. There's certainly things that can be built there in the current zoning. Now they're not going to be a house, but it's be an accessory use structure. So
Well, to follow up with that, the density for the SWA is, so technically a home could be built there. It's one house per 100,000 square feet.
okay.
So it does allow for a home to be built there.
Okay. So something could be built there. So if we go this route, sorry about that. If we go special planning district, we require things that we can't get with the current zoning.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, yeah, and it's, yeah. I'm just thinking through, I'm trying to help the commission think through it as far as how and I think what staff is hearing is the SWA, the protections that provide are critical. And it's a matter of finding that happy place. So.
Right. And so it's a matter of how do we move forward? What's the best method is to reboot and start again and
I'll just jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think Mr. Weinich is right on when it comes to the scenic waterway active, that has always been the big sticking point for me, and I think for most of the folks here, is that zone establishes protections, and by lumping it together into the SPD, it may or may not maintain those same protections. There's a risk with that. The other point, I think, for me, specifically to give the developer some feedback on that, it's not just the scenic waterway, but it's also the density. It's the combination of those two things. It's essentially the impact that this proposal would have on its neighbors, and one of its neighbors is the river, and the other one is the historic West Loveland neighborhood. And I think that those two things are so ingrained in this proposal that to move it forward is almost ignoring the red flags to it. And so I would be more with Mr. Weisgerber on the sense that this would be better served to come back in a different version, a different formation, rather than to play around and poke holes with this current proposal, when I personally think that it's kind of a bridge too far on those two fronts.
Yes, Mr. Weisgerber.
I'll move to not recommend the initiation of this SPD to council.
I'll second.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Weisgerber.
Yes.
Mr. Parker,
No.
3-0, motion carries.
3-1.
3-1.
3-1. It's been a long day.
All right. Yes.
Just
Yes.
real
So
quick.
do we? Okay. Go ahead.
If you're okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I want everybody to understand the value of having discussion and the value of dissenting opinions. there's a lot of value to be had when people don't agree and can talk through it. So while we didn't agree 100% up here, that does not negate Mr. Parker's opinion or the value of his opinion. Please, I just ask you to remember, difference of opinion gets you to a good solution.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very well spoken, and again, we are here to control, development's going to occur, and we understand that, and the property owners have the rights to develop their property. We obviously not to the detriment of the surrounding public, so what we try to do is we try to balance that. Whether this is the right solution or not this time, again, I'm not opposed to something happening on this property. Obviously, it's going to happen, so whether this, and we struggle with the right vehicle. I think the developer and the property owner, they have to throw something out there and see what people's opinions are and see where it goes. Otherwise, I like Mr. Parker. I don't work in development, but we deal in construction and buildings, and there's always a series of compromises that have to occur. Nothing's ever perfect, and until you put something on paper and throw it out there, you don't know what people are going to think. So you have to start somewhere. So I think that's important, and this is just part of the process we have to go through. So I think it's important for everybody to see that, get everybody's opinions. They're much more educated now on what everybody's feelings are. They've got some people they can contact to work out, to reach out to if they so desire, if they want to continue to move forward, to look for other avenues. So I think that's very important. And I appreciate everybody's, we're all volunteers, by the way, so we go home and want to eat dinner too, and so we don't get paid to do any of this. We just want to, I do this because I lived in Loveland, grew up in Loveland, or I still live in Loveland. I grew up in Loveland. I want Loveland to grow in the right way, and I want to hear everybody's opinion. It's just like I know, same thing. You went to Loveland High School. You were on council. We're all part of the same team. So I think everybody needs to understand that we're not trying to one way or the other to try to get the best solution for everybody. So,
and it's a start, and I think in my comments it was we need some more. It needs improvement, and I think the best way to improve that would be to go back and come back with something. There's two ways to do that. I think one way's better. They said another way's better. That's all simple it is. So that's not an opinion that I support. What they're doing. It's a start.
all right, thank you. Any other communication from the city this time? If not, do we have a meeting to adjourn? Or a meeting, a motion? We have to adjourn.
We're not having another meeting tonight.
Second.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Loveland Magazine TV videos are brought to you by the generous support of MoveToLoveland.com.